on September 13th, 2005. I'm here with Mr. and Mrs. David Stevens and our student group, starting with
Brittany Caleb from Westminster, Colorado.
Heather Hawkins from Fort Collins.
Samantha Lloyd from Staten Island, New York.
Hannah Kraft from Grand Junction, Colorado.
Nicole McDaniel from Denver, Colorado.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to talk today about the history of Weld County, and we're going to talk about the experiences of Mr. and Mrs. Stevens, and we'll start out with describing their ancestries. Start with Sue. Can you tell us about your background?
I was born in Garden City, Kansas, and we moved to Colorado when I was 3. Lived in Monte Vista, up in the San Luis Valley, until I was in the 3rd grade and came to Greeley, Colorado. And I grew up in Greeley schools and went to California during the war when my father worked for John Bean Manufacturing. They built tanks during the Second World War. Then we moved back to Greeley, and I finished high school in Greeley and married Dave in 1950. And we started our family in Hawaii because Dave was sent to the Navy in the Korean War. And we started our family over there and then came home and went back to farming. So that's mine.
My family came from England. My grandfather came over, and when he came over here, he was a fairly young man, but he stayed in the United States. And my father was, of course, his son, and my father was a farmer, a young farmer, and so they did the farming all through the war and all through the First World War. And then going to me coming back, I joined the Navy. I farmed while they were farming. Anyway, I joined the Navy, was in the Navy 4 years, and enjoyed it very well. I was stationed at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. I was a first-class torpedoman working on submarines and stuff like that. And that was very interesting. And after the war was over, which was in 1953, I think, is when the war ended.
Korean ended, yeah.
The Korean War. I had to. Sue and I talked about it. I could have stayed in the Navy, and we talked about it, and we said, let's go home back to the farm. And so we got married, and we had 3 sons, and they're doing different things now. None of them are farming, though.
One of them was a farmer for a while.
He was a farmer, just lately that he's not a. My oldest son is a professor at UNC in art, and my middle son is he's still with agriculture because he's selling the big agricultural tractors and everything we use in farming. And my young son John he's an engineer, and he is building houses in Denver. So that just gives us a short sense, I'll answer any questions I can.
Go ahead, yeah, sure.
Can you tell us anything more about your grandparents and your parents when you were growing up?
They were on the farm, and let's see, I'll tell you. My mother, she was a housewife. And we had 3. I have a brother. Now he's in California, and he's older than I am. He's 8 years old, 4 years older than I am. He's a professor at Santa Barbara, so he never came back to the farm. He stayed in education, and I stayed back in the farming all my time. And I retired probably 10 years ago. I'm 70, soon be 76. So time to retire. So that's about it. Is that okay? Okay.
That's it.
When you're 76, you don't remember everything.
Well, did you enjoy your childhood? Do you remember?
Oh, sure I do.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it on the farm. We had cows. We had horses. We had all that stuff, and a few pigs running
raised chickens.
Yes, we did raise a lot of chickens. And you've seen chickens, I'm sure.
I've seen
To go ahead with that point a little, our family, my family, and they had a deal with the Weld County Hospital in Greeley, which was the biggest hospital in Greeley, to provide all the eggs for the hospital. And that was a big job for us, because you had to go out and clean the chicken house, and and then when you got every Saturday, you'd go out and clean the chicken house, and then every evening you'd sit there and wash the eggs, get the nasty little stuff off the eggs, and then we had a candle sitting in there, and you candle them, make sure there wasn't any red spots, which would have been blood, but we used that, and that's what actually got us through the Depression. We always had a meal anyway, and I always could have a chicken. Yeah, but anyway, we had a good time. My brother and I always wanted a daughter, but we never did get a daughter. We had just boys. Yeah. Now we have one daughter-in-law, so that's good. And she's going to come to your school, I think.
Hopefully.
Colorado State.
She wants to come over here.
Yeah, she's at Greeley West now, over in Greeley. Yeah. But,
What can you remember about like your first school experience and everything?
my what?
Your first school experience?
Scared to death. Because we were the only two farm boys. We went to school with our big old shoes on, and all the other kids were back in there always neat and tidy, you know, and we were just scared to death. And my other little friend's name was Ghosty. Nickname was Ghosty Anderson. And we just went in and we thought we were going to get set water in the water tanks and everything else. But anyway, that was pretty scary because we were just different. You know? And we went to, you know where Cameron School is?
Yeah, Cameron School,
Really?
sure.
That's where all we had to go. And with all the rich kids up in the
Right.
Glenmere area and
Right.
everything, but it was pretty funny. But I melded in with them, and it was fun.
That's okay, I was one of the rich kids.
She lived above 16th Street or something like that. Yeah, that was fun. We had good teachers then. I went in as kindergartner and went all the way through, made it all the way through. Graduated really high in 1947. And it was a good. But it's like you guys, you're young, you're going to be good. Enjoy it.
Can you tell me more about your family's tie to agriculture?
Well, I could tell you that my grandfather, he was a farmer, and my father was a farmer, and I was a farmer. My brother wasn't a farmer. That's the whole little bunch of Stevenses. But we raised all kinds of different crops: sugar beets, wheat, corn,
Beans.
potatoes. My dad raised potatoes. He even raised tomatoes there for a while in a little corner of the farm. There was short rows there. And our chicken business, that was a big business. And we lived good. We never were hungry. You know, Dad bought a nice new Ford, 1936 Ford, black one as I remember, brand new. We always had a little money. Yeah.
What are some of your memories of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl days?
Well, everything was pretty tough, really tough. You know, you didn't have any spending money. Once in a while you'd get a nickel, you know, or something. But it's true. I mean, that's just the way it was. Everybody was poor. And it was just a terrible time. Because Weld County lived on rain. It had to rain, you know. It had to have snow from the mountains to get the water down to the mountains, to get to the fields, to feed the cattle, to feed the horses, to feed yourself, and feed everybody else. And if it just didn't ever rain, it was just a pitiful thing. If you had a big field like this, you'd pick another little piece of this field, and you would just water it and just baby it. It's out of those ditches that you see, that you get also. And you'd put it in here, and you'd go down here, and then you'd turn it around and make sure that it went through, and then you'd go and then you lived off that pretty much. How long did the droughts last? Probably 4 years.
Yeah.
But everybody survived, you know. Nobody starved to death, I'm sure. People were pretty tough back then.
It was a hard time.
It was a hard time. Well, you know, the Colorado had 2 years of this drought. You know, the water, it never did rain, and everybody just really did hurt the economy of Colorado. Yeah, I think we'll still have farms, but not maybe as many farms, because really, really west of Greeley, and the houses are starting to march along, and all you see is houses. It looks like a
Looks like Brooklyn, right?
yeah, that's
Pretty soon milk
A
house.
lot bigger though.
milk house. That is cute. That is really neat.
I think it's neat what you guys are saying.
So where were the two of you on the day that World War II broke out? And what are your memories from the war years?
I was down in Denver at my great aunt's house, and the radio came on, and everybody just backed away and thought, my gosh, it's the end of the world. It was very scary.
My dad worked for John Bean Manufacturing. They produced farm machinery. And when the war broke out, we were in Greeley. And he said, oh boy, here we go. We'll be sent someplace. Well, they sent him to California, Los Angeles, and they made tanks out there. So he was in charge of one of the divisions out there. So I spent the 4 years in California, and we went through the blackouts and all of the fire drills and all of that out there. So I went to school out in Glendale, California.
And as we were talking earlier, it was probably one of the only times in the United States when there was a real fear of invasion, of physical invasion of the country. And there was talk about that constantly, wasn't there?
By the Japanese.
By the
Yeah.
Japanese.
Yeah.
We did have rumors, and as it turned out, many years later, there was one-man submarine that hit the coast, and they found a two-man submarine down in San Diego. So there was truly,
They were getting close.
yeah, it could have happened. So we all had our warnings that we had to do. And at night, when the sirens went off, why, the mother would yell, "Hurry, get to the windows." We'd pull all of the blackout drapes, turn all the lights off, and then the searchlights would start, and they'd scan the skies until they spotted the plane that caused the blackout in the first place. And fortunately, they were all our planes. We didn't have any Japanese planes fly over. But that's what we went through.
It's been hard.
It was, we didn't think of it as being a kid. I didn't think of it as being hard. It was just exciting. My goodness, look what's happening.
Look at the guns.
But the most exciting part was my sister was older, and all of her boyfriends would come by before they left to go, and so they were all dressed in their beautiful uniforms. I thought they were wonderful.
Army Air Corps.
Army, Air Corps, and Navy, Marines, and what? My sister knew a lot of them.
So, after Kennedy was shot, the world changed. How do you think that things have changed since that time?
Good question. Well, I think the United States is still the best place to live in the world. We all know that. And who knows what would have happened if he hadn't been killed? If JFK hadn't been killed. But we're a pretty tough bunch of people, and we did that, and now we're doing the deal down in New Orleans. That's not even really what you want to hear, but I think we're strong enough in the United States that we can survive a lot of things. It's terrible, like the world. Maybe some people say we shouldn't be over there, but maybe we should be over there. We have terrorists. Terrorists are really the biggest problem we have now. I think, anyway. different time. It was pretty a neat time when Kennedy everything was going good, and then boom, of course, and that changed everything. And everything is changing all the time. You're not stable. I mean, something's always happening. And, anyway, that's my idea. Anyway. But I think we're strong enough in this country we can make it. We have great people. Even the lawyers might.
You mentioned before that you were in Hawaii and that you lived in California. Have you guys traveled anywhere else or been to other places besides those?
Yes, since we retired, we've been to quite a few places. We've been all in the Pacific, from Japan to China, not to China, but we're down to Singapore. It was a 21-day trip, and that was really nice. Yeah, and we're about to take another one. But we didn't, we're not that long. So
Oh, we went to Germany and
yes, that was
Switzerland,
Switzerland. Yeah, we did quite a bit.
Austria.
Yeah, I don't think we just traveled. So. As old as we are, we can get a lot of traveling in. You guys are young and cute.
What's been your favorite place that you've traveled to?
I like Japan a lot.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah,
I
really
thought Japan was really an interesting country,
completely
interesting
different.
culture. Mm-hmm. And the people were nice
Very nice.
when we were there. I like Germany because I am ethnically German from both sides of my family, and I like Switzerland because my grandfather was born in Switzerland. And
She picks pretty nice, neat places.
Yeah.
Germany is so beautiful country. I don't know why they'd ever go to war. I mean, it's clean and green and just a beautiful country. Yeah. There's always the bad guys around too, No, it's good.
How do you think technology has changed the way people live?
he was talking about that earlier with Steve, about the hydraulics.
How farmers then, prior to the hydraulics, when they had to do something, all they used was their backs and their muscles to lift anything up and to do anything. Not only farmers, but anything. But and then hydraulics came along, and it just made them wonderful for everything. For building, for everything. I think. You understand what hydraulics are?
Kind of.
Well, if you have a
You
tractor,
can explain that.
if you have a tractor in front of you, sitting out here, you have a big bucket, and then the tractor goes like this and picks all that sand up and whatever it is, and instead of a man having to do it with his hands, he puts a lever and it all drops off out of the bucket. You've seen them, all the building that's going around here. You know how much hydraulics is used in that. It's a big deal, really one of the biggest deals, I think.
Do you think kids have it easy today?
You think kids have it easy?
No. I think it's a pretty tough time for kids. I do anyway.
I do too.
We were a little bit ornery, but not that you guys aren't having a good time sometimes.
Oh, it's just that you have so many more things to contend with than we did. We were more insulated from the rest of the world. We were more insulated from the bad things in the world that were going on. Because here we are in a small community. And when we graduated from high school, our town was 16,000 people. And it was bigger than Fort Collins, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
It was bigger.
And not really is 85,000 or 90,000. So
And Fort Collins is 100 and what are you now?
200,000, I would guess. Easily 200,000.
Is it now?
About 120,000.
Oh, it's more than that.
Oh,
I
okay.
just drove through that much. Didn't get lost, man. Good old Steve.
Well, Steve was driving us, so that's good.
No, but we didn't have a lot of troubles, and you guys have to put up with, there is so much to have, to buy. lie. You gotta have a car, you gotta keep up with the Joneses, you gotta have a big house, blah, 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 blah. And back in those days, you just didn't do that. I mean, it was done, but it wasn't in the same way. You just go down Highway 34 now to Loveland or someplace, and you think, my God, what are we doing now?
What happened to the wheat fields?
Yeah.
So it's going to be kind of tough for you guys, but it's a good, still, as I said, it's the best country in the world. I'll guarantee you that.
American ingenuity. You'll do all right.
You will do good.
What do you guys think is the best advice that you guys have ever received or could give anybody?
Oh, my.
Good question, too.
I don't know. My dad used to say, if I get all my kids raised, which is 3, if I get all my kids raised and none of them end up in the pen, I'll figure I was a good parent. So I've kind of had that same attitude. I raised 3 boys. None of them have wound up in the pen. And I kind of feel like we've been pretty good parents.
Now those boys are pretty old.
They're old. They're like this one over
That's
here.
right, pretty old, that's right.
50 years old.
Let's pick up on your point about when changes and the advent of electricity, because you have no concept. I mean, now you have a little understanding what it was like. New Orleans has no electricity. Well, that changes your life completely.
Oh, sure
But
does.
there was a time when there was no electricity,
That's right.
That's right.
and then what happened? And before that, it was you did things in an entirely different way.
A lamp, kerosene lamp sitting in the middle of the table.
Yeah.
I remember my dad reading the paper in the afternoon, or in the morning. Yeah.
And that's what they were saying about candling eggs, because you didn't have an electric bulb to put the egg in front of so you could see through it. You literally used a candle, right?
Yeah.
And electricity was somewhat late coming to Weld County compared to other
Well,
places.
1937, I think we got it,
Mm-hmm.
which is a long time ago, out on the farm. And other farmers didn't get it for a long time until the RAA came along.
Well, we thought your farm was clear out in the country
So, yeah.
when we were kids, but now it's in the middle of Greeley. So,
Is it still there? Is it still a farm, or are there homes on it now?
On the farms?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Well, like specifically yours or your family?
On my farms, yeah. On Reservoir Road, I don't know if you're in Greeley, that's been farms for 10 years, hasn't it?
I don't know
Sure.
about.
And the one on Bittersweet, it's 5 years, it's been a farm going from it, it's all houses, a lake, and it's a beautiful place.
Let's take a few pictures. In fact, Sue, can you describe this first picture here? Because that's quite historic.
Oh, this is the first nursing class from Denver, Denver DU. And David's grandmother and his great aunt Ruby were in this class. And I'm not sure of the date. That's why I haven't written it on the back. I believe it was about 1885, but I'm not positive of that. So I'm going to have to do some research and find out exactly when that was. And then what else did we
Let's
got
see.
there?
Let's see.
Wait, can I ask a silly question?
Not
What's
silly,
this, what's
ever.
this a picture of?
Oh, that's a beet topper.
Okay.
There are harvesting beets, sugar beets.
Tractors pulling the sugar
Yeah,
beet along.
and that's you.
Yep.
And how
I
long-
tried to bring some of the ones that involve farming and
This is a farmhouse on my farm.
on Reservoir Road. That is now a home for independent living. We turned the house over to a lady who now has a home for independent living for people who have disabilities. And that's what it's used for now. The house is still there.
How old would the house be?
The house was built in 1887, originally, the original part of the house. And Dave's family bought it in 1911.
When did your families come over to Marco?
Boy, I'm not sure.
Well, let's
It was
see.
from England, they were all English, but I'm not really sure.
My grandfather came from Switzerland when he was 17, and he was born in 1860.
Well, my father was born in Denver in 85,
Yeah.
so we can kind of go back to that.
1895. 95.
Yeah.
Where is this picture?
This is, we think this is up the canyon, up above Loveland. And they're on a picnic, and can you imagine dressing like that? This is David's grandfather, and I don't know who the ladies are, but that's his grandfather. But they're also dressed up.
Yes, they are.
On a picnic.
You call that dressed up?
No, we wouldn't wear that today.
Oh, thanks.
Pretty dressed up.
And Dave, can you explain what's going on in this picture? Let me just put the camera here. This is,
Oh,
That's funny.
oh, David will tell you, this is stacking hay.
That's a haystacker. And I notice here that there's cactuses in here too. That is interesting, see that?
Yeah, well, that's one of your
Yeah.
pictures.
Yeah, there's
So it must be you and your brother and your dad or your grandpa.
you go out, you know what to cut hay, you understand cut hay? What you cut,
Yes.
you cut it with your horses, they put that back there, a little horse team like this here. And then you cut it, then you put it in windrows, and then you put it in a sling, like a sling